That's okay, because like I've said in the last episode, I've had a blind duck before, so I know how to approach this situation. And thankfully, Emily also reminded me, hey, you should probably clip his wings. And then I did discuss that with my vet, and my vet also agreed I should clip his wings because he is continuing to further hurt himself, because it's like, Mr. Whip doesn't fly a lot. Actually, none of my ducks fly a lot, but every single morning when I open the coop door, I'd say like half of them fly out of the coop and into the pond. And they always, most of the time, gracefully land in the pond. But Mr. Whip is not doing that anymore. He's falling, crashing, and he'll go from like being 6 feet up to just straight down on the rocks, which is, of course, not safe. So I had to make the decision to clip his wings because it was what was going to keep him safe. And I ended up posting a video about how I clipped his wings, like how to do it the right way, because a lot of people were asking me when I mentioned that I was going to need to clip his wings, like, what is wing clipping? Does it hurt them? Why do you do it? Are there alternatives? Like, I had a lot of questions, and so I made like a 5-minute long video and posted it the other day explaining wing clipping, explaining the nuances of wing clipping, explaining why you probably shouldn't do it for like a parrot type bird, and how there's research to back that you shouldn't be doing this to a parrot type bird for both their physical exercise needs as well as their enrichment needs, as well as just the emotions of a bird who is meant to fly all the time not having that ability. But it's very different for ducks and chickens than it is for parrots. And so I tried to do my best to explain that in this video, which is why it was so long, because I wanted people to really understand that you shouldn't just be clipping a bird's wings for no reason, right? Mr. Whip has a medical need for it. I know how to do it safely. If I don't do it, he's going to continue to get more hurt. And he's also a duck, so a domestic duck at that. So flying is not a big part of his day or his life really at all. Like I said, he flies out of the coop in the morning into the pond. It's maybe like 10 feet, and that's it. He doesn't fly at all for the rest of the day. He doesn't even fly back into the coop.
One of the reasons, so if you ever observe wild ducks at like large scales, like I go out every year and I watch migrations and I see, like I go for the waterfowl, so I see all the wild ducks. One thing that's just very ingrained in their survival instinct, and this is one of the very few times you'll actually see your domestic ducks actually fly or even attempt to fly if it's an unflighted breed, is something called flushing. So when one bird takes off in an urgency, it triggers all of the other birds to attempt to take off in an urgency. So what probably happens when you open the coop door is one bird gets excited and flushes, not for the same reasons that wild ducks flush. They flush out of excitement.
Oatmeal. Oatmeal gets so excited. She's always the first duck in the pond. She like flies from the very back of the coop and like shoots up, and she's like almost at the top of the door. Like she could literally barely make it through the door because she's so high up, and she is always like multiple seconds ahead of all the other ducks getting into the pond because she's so excited.
So when you get one duck that flies it, and you probably can see this in your flock, it triggers a chain reaction and all the other birds start popping up into the air. And so with Mr. Whip especially, like living in a flock, it might be different if you had a solo duck, which you shouldn't have already. But say you have a solo duck indoors, you could probably get away with not clipping a duck. To be honest, that's blind. You could probably get away with it. But if it's living in a flock, he's still going to hear and feel, or whatever degree of vision he still has from that one eye, the urge to fly. And the urge to do that reaction that they have. And so you can't get away with not clipping in that case, because he's gonna fly. Even though ducks are very grounded animals compared to other birds, they still will have that response.
It's just a really interesting topic to compare why wing clipping a duck is so different from wing clipping a parrot, because I think you actually taught me this when you made a video on it, like at least a year ago.
I taught you something?
Yeah! You taught me that it's not just the fact that heavyweight duck breeds are large-bodied. That's not why they can't fly. There are other large-bodied birds, like, say, pelicans, who can fly. It's more about the body proportions in comparison to the size of their wings. And we have bred ducks, you know, for meat purposes or egg-laying purposes to have large bodies, but we did not account for larger wings to be able to have them sustain flight.
Super interesting is that's actually completely unique to the mallard. So all of those mallard-derived breeds, that's why it didn't happen with Muscovies, because when we bred Muscovies to be larger, they're still much larger than their wild ancestors, really big ducks, but they have huge wingspans. So their wings grew with their body size, where that just for some reason didn't happen with the mallard. It's really cool because you can actually see this. So if you ever go look at your bantams, you'll notice that their wingtips go all the way to their base. So right to the butt of their tail, and it covers their full body. And if you actually think about it and go look at standards, which I do this all the time, you'll notice that their wings are not making it. They have the same size wings as the bantams. So their wings are not strong enough to carry their body weight. And I think have you ever seen the wingspan of an albatross?
Yes.
It's crazy. Like, and so when you pay attention to wingspans across various birds, you'll notice that underbody birds have really, really large wingspans, like shockingly large. Usually and so a domestic duck with that weight would need massive wings. And Muscovies do have that. They have really big wings, which is super cool.
Right.
And they have different, I'm gonna geek out for a second because I don't know if you knew this. The mallard type ducks have wings that are designed for like long distance and fast flight. And Muscovy type birds, because they're roosting birds, have wing types that are designed to help them navigate through trees. So there's actually a completely different shape to their wings. I'm not doing this justice because I read about this years ago and I thought it was the coolest thing. But they have more rounded tips. So I think their flight is slower but more navigated, whereas mallards can fly very far for a very long time, and they're very effective with migration with their wings. And
wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know
that.
I feel like I don't know a lot about Muscovies just because it's not a breed that I would own. But a Muscovy, people come at me, it's not because I think they're ugly. They're just very large birds, and I prefer very small birds. Like you were saying with the fact that mallard ducks migrate, the two biggest reasons, besides flushing, that you would see wild ducks flying is either migration or to escape a predator. And those aren't things that our domestic ducks have to do. My birds live in a predator-resistant aviary, so Mr. Whip is not flying to get away from predators. And they don't migrate because they're domestic ducks, so they don't even have the instincts telling them to migrate, nor are they physically capable of migrating, even if they wanted to. So clipping a duck's wings, in that sense, is just not equivalent to clipping a parrot's wings, who really needs flight for exercise and mental stimulation. That's just not a part of a duck's daily routine the way it is for a parrot.
You also, this is something that I think is silly because people get so caught up on the migration thing. And for those of you that don't know, I'm a big bird nerd. This is my realm. I am a geek when it comes to birds. They're my whole life. So I love migration and I get excited for migration. I actually do have a birding profile, Chirps and Waffles. If you follow me on that platform, you know that you get to hear more about my birding antics and studying migration patterns and all of that. But so everybody obsesses over the fact that ducks migrate, this, and that. Ducks are still partial migrants. They do not migrate. You will see ducks in the winter, even in freezing cold places. And it can be a variety of things that make them stay. So it's not like, and I think that a lot of people that don't understand migration obsess over the concept of migration and migration instinct as like this beautiful thing that the birds look forward to. Migration is insanely metabolically demanding. Flight is insanely metabolically demanding. And so everybody obsesses over this concept of flight, especially for a bird like a duck. And I'm telling you, go outside and watch a duck fly in the sky. And tell me if it looks fun to do for an extended period of time. They look like they are working their butts off. They're big birds. They got to flap like crazy. They can't coast like some other birds can. Incredibly demanding of their bodies. And really interesting, they did a study on domestic ducks, just like you know how you were just talking about their predator flight response, because that is true of wild birds. Wild ducks are the worst things to photograph because if you breathe air in the neighborhood of a wood duck, that thing is gone. Like, I've flushed ducks, and people are always like, ethical photography. How the heck are you not flushing ducks is my question, because I didn't even know the ducks were in this area, and they're in the sky. The minute that I crunch a leaf, they're gone. So wild ducks really depend on that flight to escape predators, and they're flying constantly, and that's the reason for it. They did a study on domestic ducks, and I think I was talking to you about this the other day, where they were studying if domestic ducks still utilize or prefer that flight response in domestication settings and how their behavior has changed by being domesticated and not being exposed to the same threat levels as the wild. And they found that in domestic settings, and also this is very unfortunate because this is why a lot of our birds die in predator attacks, even flighted birds. I hear all the time about call ducks getting taken by predators and stuff like that. They prioritize walking or running over flight, imminently threatening situations. So that's why if you have some ducks that are skittish, right, you go to approach them and they start running or walking away. They don't take off like a wild duck does. If you pay attention to a wild duck, there's no run walk. It's in the air, you know? And so that's really interesting that they actually have lost that instinct to take to the air, and they prioritize running and walking. And I think that really speaks to how grounded these birds are compared to their wild ancestors, and how much less meaningful it is for them to maintain their ability to flight because they don't want to use it. And I think that it's funny to try to preserve it. It's hilarious when this conversation comes up and they're like, they want to fly. No, they don't. And guess what? I don't want to run a marathon. I probably could if I trained for it. I'm not gonna, like, if you took away my right to run a marathon, okay, go for it.
Used that comparison in my book, Raising Ducks for Beginners and Beyond. I was like, your domestic ducks are not going to migrate even if they wanted to because they can't. They don't have that ability. They haven't trained for it. They don't do that kind of flying. They're not capable of it.